What's up, sons and daughters? It is Sam Jesse. I am back with the Hokieball show on the Sons of Saturday. I got Chris Hirons with me, Tech Sideline beat reporter for baseball. You can hear him on the Tech Sideline podcast. You can read his stuff on techsideline.com. Chris, first off, glad the semester ended well, and we've started this summer ball stretch. Never really ends for you, does it?
No, not really. I guess I'm done with college now, but I mean, aside from that, yeah, keep going with baseball.
Well, the Hokies aren't totally done quite yet. They have finished up the regular season, though, and Chris and I were just talking. Look, not the best end to the regular season. Hokies finish 30-21 overall. They've hit the 30-win mark in back-to-back years for the first time since 2012, 2013, I believe. So it's about a decade. A great achievement for Coach Sheff and this program, especially considering how good the ACC has been the last couple of years. Hokies finished 12-17 in conference play after losing. Let's see, they went 1-2 against Carolina, 0-3 against Clemson, and 1-2 against Wake Forest. So a bit of a slide there. We'll get into that. And they got a game tomorrow, ACC Tournament here in the Triangle area in Durham, North Carolina. The Hokies are in Pool C playing Boston College Tuesday morning at 11 a.m. And then they play Clemson on Thursday. We'll get into those matchups a little bit later, but first we're going to kind of put a bow on the regular season, I guess, in the last couple weeks, because Chris, it's been the last 3-4 weeks of the season kind of flew by. You had a few rain delays, and then it was non-conference, and then all of a sudden it was the final two ACC series for the Hokies.
Yeah, I mean, you go back to the North Carolina series. The Sunday game got pushed, to a doubleheader on Saturday, and Tech really hadn't fared too well on those. You thought maybe, they got the Friday win and they could steal one of those Saturday games, win that series, put themselves on the right track going into the Clemson and Wake Forest series, to set themselves up well for this weekend to get a spot in the ACC or not the ACC tournament, but the NCAA tournament. Didn't really turn out that way. The Clemson series really didn't go their way, especially after the first 5 innings on Friday. And then, the Wake Forest series, it is what it is. I mean, they're the number one team in the country for a reason. I thought it was interesting. Tech really could have rolled over in this series. They led through the first 5 innings in the first and second game.
Yep.
That they ended up losing, but and they kind of steamrolled their way through Sunday. But it was kind of something they didn't want to lose that much, but they got the wins, kind of where they could with UNC and the last one with Wake Forest.
Yeah, I mean, that UNC, after the Hokies win 7-0 on that Friday, you're looking at it, you're like, man, this team can make a push to host a regional. This team can make a push to be one of the top seeds in the ACC tournament. Like, it was all in front of the Hokies. And then, like we've said all year, doubleheaders, man, have killed this team. And I don't really know if there's a reason behind it, but in the ACC, Tech only has one win in a doubleheader scenario. That was when they split with Duke. They went 0-2. Miami wasn't a doubleheader. Boston College was a doubleheader. Went 0-2 against Boston College.
Miami was a doubleheader.
Miami was a doubleheader. That's right. So they went 0-2 the day against Miami, 0-2 against Boston College, 0-2 against North Carolina, split against Duke.
Yep.
I'm probably forgetting one somewhere.
No, that might be it. But yeah, I mean,
that's a lot. That's a lot of doubleheader days. And, is it pitching staff? Is it guys not being mentally locked in? Is it who knows, right? But at the end of the day, the Hokies lost a lot of games very quickly this season, which doesn't normally happen in college sports, but it did for the Hokies. End of the season kind of tailed off. And the Clemson series, man, that was brutal. The Hokies got beat up pretty good on Friday, 15-4. Saturday's game was, I don't think I've ever seen a baseball team lose in that fashion. I've seen them lose on base running errors, but to be down 5 runs, to score 4, to be on your third pitcher of the inning if you're Clemson, and Clemson had no one left to pitch. Like that guy was not coming out. He was going to finish the game, and you get a ground ball up the middle and a weird base running error that seems more like a I don't I've never seen that kind of base running error.
I mean, yeah. I mean, it was a weirdly placed ball that TV didn't really catch. Like it was kind of right behind the second base bag. It was really placed, and I mean, Christian Martin. I mean, he knows. Everyone knew that you're supposed to slide in that situation, but it was so weirdly placed that you know only a few shortstops in the ACC would have gotten to. So I mean, that was part of it, and then yeah.
Yeah, it was a great play by the Clemson shortstop to even knock the ball down. And that's kind of one where you're like, all right, just knock the ball down, keep it in the infield. He gloves it, turns immediately to second, and I think what I saw a bunch of people on Twitter being like, "Oh, that's bad fundamentals by the base runners ball," and it's like, yeah, well, also in that position, normally whoever's fielding that is going to kind of run across second base, and the Clemson player didn't. He kind of just stood behind the bag, tapped it out in front of him, and then threw the ball right across from Martin. So like it was really weird the whole time. And to me, it looked like Martin was kind of stuck in between okay, do I slide and then I risk sliding over the bag and interfering with the studs? Or do I do what you see a lot in Major League Baseball now, especially with bigger players, where they're like, I'll just slow up and use my big body and just try to get in the way a little bit. It's almost like he got caught in between there and just kept running, which is, understandable. It happens in sports, really just unfortunate for the Hokies. On the other hand of that, though, it'd be nice to not allow the opposing team to score 9+ runs in 3 straight games. But that's a whole other issue. But yeah, just weird things for the Hokies this year. Weather, weird games, guys making really good plays against them. I think in back-to-back ACC series, the National Player of the Week played against the Hokies. So it happens.
I mean, that's what happens when, I mean, they're just that hurt. Like, they kind of have to ride Drew Hackenberg for as long as they did, which is why, they had that 8-run fifth. I mean, they were up 4-1 at that point on that Friday game during Clemson. I mean, they're so hurt that they had to ride Hackenberg for so long. They have to go with Arguelles for as long as they can because, they've got a bullpen game on Sunday and they used 7, 8 pitchers on, the other day on Saturday against Wake Forest. It's just, they're so hurt. Like, I don't know if you can call the end of the regular season, or I guess when you're looking at the overarching theme, I don't know if you can call it a disappointment. I mean, if you look at the record overall, yeah, disappointing. But when you kind of dig deeper into it, and it's like, okay, so they didn't have, a great regular season. It wasn't because of poor performance. It was, there were guys that had to step up that maybe weren't ready and they were too young for it. But I mean, what it really came down to was just injuries, guys who are pitching, that, not that they shouldn't be out there, but, they're hurt and, their stuff isn't as effective. And I think you saw a lot of that at the end of the year, especially after the Friday UNC game, the doubleheader and then the Clemson sweep.
Yeah. And I think, if you're looking back, what's disappointing from the Hokies season, watching the whole thing, only winning one game at Pitt is a lot more disappointing to me than only winning one game against North Carolina, right? Especially since 2 of those losses were by 1 run,
Yeah.
Boston College, good team, but that's a series playing at home that you'd like to win, right? The Radford game was weird and stuff like that.
The Boston College game, I mean, they dominated them on that Friday, and then they had a bad Saturday, couldn't turn around, 2 close losses. They weren't really beat up then, but the Pitt series, both Henry Weicker and Kieran Higgins were unavailable. Like it was just, then they had to kind of rely on guys like Tyler Dean and Griffin Stig who hadn't been in that situation before where, you got to close these close games out. And, I mean, that's just kind of just the theme all year was that they're just hurt. Like they just kind of had they kind of had to piece games together, and the wins that they did piece together, they did it, and the losses, it was just like the injury bug just bit them bad this year.
Yeah, Chris, I don't know how much of a math guy you are, but when you have 2 starters and you play 3 games a weekend, it's a little tough. That's kind of an impossible task. And, are there reasons Virginia Tech kind of found themselves in that situation other than injuries maybe? I mean, yeah, probably, but you if Griffin Green stays healthy, I think the end of this season's very different.
Mm.
But I mean, injuries happen in sports all the time, and the good programs, the really good ones, kind of adjust to that throughout the season. I think maybe for Virginia Tech as a program, and we'll probably talk about this in a podcast we have in a few weeks, but it's like, okay, how do you win when everything doesn't go perfect? That's kind of what these great programs can do. So, in some good news though, the Hokies kind of cleared up on the non-conference issues in between. So after the Hokies traveled to Florida State and they won that series 2-1, they hosted James Madison, a good James Madison team. They won that game. They hosted Marshall, and they were supposed to play 2 games. One got rained out, and they beat Marshall, swept Bowling Green easily with 2 games there, and then absolutely demolished Liberty in Lynchburg, a very good Liberty team. Won that one 14-1. They called it after 7 innings. So it's like the Hokies weren't losing to bad teams towards the end of the year. When they played teams that they were more talented than, they took care of business. And I think that's a good sign too, especially with how many young arms the Hokies threw, how many freshmen were starting for this team, to kind of clean up the non-conference towards the end of the year. And of course, to beat the number 1 team in the country on the road in the last regular season game. I think the Hokies will have a little bit less sour of a taste in their mouth heading to the summer.
Yeah, I mean, there's still a lot of baseball left for Tech to play. I mean, they have 18 innings at least this week. You go 1-1 or 2-0, and you win your pool. I know we'll get into that in a minute, but I mean, that has implications. Maybe they make the postseason, or maybe they make the NCAA tournament. I mean, it's just such a weird end of the year. They looked like they were kind of a lock to make the tournament during that UNC series. Yeah, they were on the bubble, but right before that UNC series was like, okay, if Tech goes out and they win, they take 2 or 3 from UNC, and they take 2 or 3 from Clemson. They've put themselves in a good spot going into that Wake Forest series, and obviously that didn't happen to where now they've really kind of it's kind of their NCAA tournament hopes are kind of on a prayer at this point.
Yeah, I think it's down to the ACC tournament. Currently, D1 baseball does not have them listed in the first 4 out, so you'd assume the Hokies probably have to jump 10 to 15 teams, maybe less. You don't really know at this point, right? I think being in the ACC helps them. The
RPI helps them.
RPI is not terrible. RPI right now is sitting at 43 in the country, so. Virginia Tech's RPI is right there around with Maryland, Louisville, Texas Tech, UC Irvine. They're kind of around teams that are in that discussion as well. So RPI is not going to be what keeps them out of the NCAA tournament, I would say.
Yeah, what might keep them out is their conference record, and that's what the committee also looks at, and also, so in terms of the committee, there is no ACC representative, which is interesting because the NCAA baseball is kind of dominated by the ACC and the SEC and the Big 12, and the Big 12 I'm pretty sure has a representative, and I think the SEC does, but there's no ACC rep on the committee, and I think, one, that could hurt them, and 2, their conference record also hurts. Peter Sackler broke this down a few weeks ago after the UNC series. He said, the team's kind of broken it down to where your conference record really does matter when it comes to selection committee. Teams that are at 500 or their conference record is at 500 or a game over 500, they have a 90% chance of making the tournament. And teams that, their conference record is under 500, even just a game under 500, it's about a 10% shot at making the tournament.
Yeah, I mean, we said that at the beginning of the season. You go 500 in the ACC, you're in. And Hokies couldn't do that. Two really tough series to end. So I think you were really counting on Boston College and Pitt, those being series that you win, and didn't happen. All right, let's get into what the Hokies have left, because it's still possible if they win the ACC tournament. And Hokies basketball did it. And to be honest, I think it's much easier to get hot playing baseball and just kind of find your way to win a game than it is to win in Brooklyn and for basketball. So who knows? Hokies will play Boston College Thursday morning, a Boston College team that started off really hot, kind of fizzled out towards the end of the year. You know, I think if you had to pick a team for the Hokies to play first, Boston College might not be your first choice, but it's a good matchup for the Hokies. I think they're definitely not in a terrible group.
Yeah, I mean, it could be a lot worse. You could have Wake Forest or UVA in the pool.
Yeah.
I mean, but I think Boston College is a good draw. You know, they blew them out in the Friday game, and they played two. If you just look at the box score, it doesn't look all that close. But you know, those two Boston College games were pretty close. By the end, I think Boston College ended up running away with it in the eighth. In that first doubleheader game, and then the second one, I think they might have won by 2-ish runs, somewhere along those lines. Yeah, they won by 4 runs in the second game, but you know, a 4-run seventh in that third game of the series, and that's what kind of did Tech in. But you know, if they limit those big innings, and you know they've been able to in some places of the year, and other places they really haven't been able to. But if you limit the big inning against Boston College, you know they've got a big shot. They've got a good shot to win.
Yeah, and Boston College, they're currently sitting at 15th in the RPI. They've done really well this season, 34 wins. A credit to them for having a great year, but it's a team they're 500 on the year against teams in the top 50 in the RPI. That's where the Hokies land. And so, you know, you'd like to think in a one-game scenario, can Tech beat Boston College? Yeah, I mean, Boston College hasn't been great against top competition this year. So there's always that chance. If you're curious, the Hokies aren't much better. They're 6-14 against the top 50 in the RPI. But you know, Boston College is a team that I think if you were to play one game, which team's going to win, a good amount of people are probably going to pick the Hokies based on talent alone. The other matchup is not so fun. The Hokies are paired with maybe the hottest team in the country, the Clemson Tigers. They just look unbeatable all of a sudden. They've had I think it's almost like an 8-week stretch now of pretty flawless baseball. The Tigers are looking like not only can they compete for the ACC title, they're looking like they can compete in Omaha. That's a tough one.
Yeah, I mean the thing about Clemson, like they don't have a bunch of pro prospects. They're not Wake Forest. They're not even UNC, where you know they're constantly churning out pro prospects, but they have guys. You know, they're kind of just scrappy. You know, they can string a bunch of 2-out hits together. And I mean, that's what killed Tech in during that series was, you know, they would get 2 outs in the inning, or they'd have 1 out. Some guy would hit a double, and then they get the second out, but couldn't finish the inning off. And that's kind of what happened, especially on actually all 3 days, really. Their 2-out hitting was. I mean, I've never seen a team hit like that with 2 outs.
They're feeling it. And I think, you know, I was thinking in my head, I was like, oh, are they this year's Virginia Tech? Like they're just insanely hot at the second half of the season. I'm like, I mean, yeah, but also no. Like Tech was doing it with guys who were first, second round MLB prospects. Like they don't have a Gavin Cross. They don't have a Tanner Schobel.
Yeah.
They
I mean,
don't
you could
have.
argue
They
you
have
could
good
argue
players, but
yeah, I mean, you could argue Caden Grice, you know, I mean, one of the best two-way guys in the country, but they don't I mean, they don't have a Gavin Cross. They don't have I mean, last year's lineup and, you know, part of the drop off is, you know, they probably have last year they had 6 guys, 5, 6 guys that'll go in the top 5 rounds in that lineup, in that everyday lineup. And Clemson doesn't have that. Like they're just I think they're just they're playing they are so hot. And I
yeah, I
think
mean,
and it's so contagious. Hitting is contagious, and they've shown that over the past. They were they were in the same spot Tech was, 2-7 in the ACC during the first week of April, and both teams got hot, but obviously Clemson, was kind of able to finish the job that Tech wasn't able to.
Cam Canarella, ACC Freshman of the Year, outfielder for them.
Yeah.
Really good player. Billy Amick, also kind of their DH utility power bat, is hitting a stupid high average for a guy who kind of has the offensive role that he does. So they've had players play really well, but overall, yeah, they're just a bunch of good players who are all getting hot at the same time, and they have good enough pitching to supplement their offense. Let's go into the All ACC awards that are announced today, and the Hokies are pretty well represented. Player of the year, Kyle Teal from Virginia. I thought that was kind of an interesting one, but also, how many times does a catcher win Player of the Year in a conference? So shout out to all the catchers out there, but very, very good player. I think you could have gone a lot of ways there, but obviously very talented. Pitcher of the year, back-to-back, Rhett Lauder for Wake Forest. The dude is unreal. He should be pitching in like AAA by now. I don't know what he's doing, beating up on all these poor college kids. Defensive player of the year, this one pretty obvious. Vance Honeycutt from North Carolina. The guy's a walking highlight in center field. Really fun to watch. Killed the Hokies a bit. And coach of the year, Tom Walter from Wake Forest. I don't think so. I mean, because his team is kind of stacked, but I think maybe coach of the year in terms of they've really done a good job building up to this year. Like we've seen Wake Forest building up over the past 2 or 3 years to be this team that is maybe one of, if not the favorite heading into the NCAA tournament.
Yeah. I mean, it was kind of expected going into the year. I mean, they returned 8 of their 9 bats or whatever it was. That makes sense that, he kind of wins the, ACC coach. I think you could argue Clemson's coach. I mean, a coaching change, over the summer. It's his first year there. They start 2-7 and then have this turnaround. I mean, Wake Forest never really faced any sort of adversity this year. They won every single ACC series they play. I think they were the first since Louisville to do it when they did it in 2015. But I mean, all those awards well deserved. Kyle Teal, I think Kyle Teal is one of the best baseball players I've ever seen in the past 3 years.
Really?
Collegiate baseball? Oh yeah. I mean,
he's very good.
Yeah, I mean, he had a down year last year, but I mean, he came back. I don't remember what his final stats were, but going into that the UVA series in April, I mean, he was hitting, I think, like 390, 400. I think Kyle Teal will be a very good professional player. It'll be interesting to see how his skills kind of translate to the next level. I don't know if he'd be, not that I don't know if he'd be an MLB star, but I think he could be a guy who plays every day for a few years at one point. But Kyle Teal, I think Kyle Teal is the real deal when it comes to college baseball.
Kyle Teal is the real deal. Yeah, that UVA team, talk about underperforming. They're very, very talented, and they've kind of done this in the ACC this year. Perfect non-conference schedule, though. Yeah. That's pretty cool. That's very hard to do.
Yeah.
Where do the Hokies fall on this list? Well, they do have a first teamer. That is Jack Hurley, the center fielder. Very well deserved. His numbers are ridiculous. He's an automatic home run guy. If he didn't miss 8 games, his numbers would be even better. Really excited to watch. I mean, it's been awesome watching Jack Hurley over the past few years. When he was a freshman, Coach Shep said, look, in terms of tools, this is the best guy I've ever had. And we're like, whoa, really? It's stuff like he strikes out a lot. Looks like he's a bit of a hothead. And then all of a sudden last year, you saw a really polished, really disciplined player, great in the field, electric arm, consistent power bat. Jack Hurley has been everything that he was hyped up to be when he came to Virginia Tech.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, I mean, Chef was super, super high in him when he, during his first year, he struggled, like you said, with inconsistency. He would strike out a lot, didn't walk much. And then, that switch kind of flipped last year. And, he said it didn't really have to do with any of, swing adjustments or anything like that. He said it was just more about confidence, which makes sense. I mean, if you walk into a room or, I would say Jack Hurley's probably one of the most confident people I've ever met. I don't think he's cocky in that way. I think he's just a very confident person. And he said it multiple times. Like, every time he's in the box and every time, he never thinks about really hitting a home run. It's more of he's thinking, I'm better than better than this pitcher. I'm gonna get a hit off him. And so I think that's just kind of the way Jack is. Who knows how he'll kind of project at the next level in terms of professional baseball, but he has all 5 tools that scouts want. He's got good speed. He's got a plus power. He can make good contact. His glove's pretty good, and I've seen reports where people are like, "Oh, he's got a below average arm," but I've never seen that. I've always seen his. I think his arm is a lot better than what professional scouts give him credit for. But I mean, then again, I'm not a professional scout, but I mean, I still watch this guy every day, and I'm like, man, how in the world do you throw it from deep center field to third base without hitting the cutoff man? That is a very, very good arm to have in the outfield.
Yeah. I mean, he's special. I'm excited to see him in his pro career. Another guy who had a great year for the Hokies, Carson DiMartini, finishes on all ACC third team. I think he's definitely a second team guy. I'm actually kind of surprised to see him third team. Part of it might be he was injured, had to move kind of from everyday third base to an everyday DH guy. Um, I think the Hokies, I don't know if the Hokies really missed him in the field, but certainly I think players overall perform better usually when they're playing in the field and hitting. They can kind of impact the game more. Carson DiMartini, though, another good year and another really talented player for the Hokies.
I think one underrated part of his game is the way he walked a lot this year. I think he drew 45 walks and he only struck out 40 times already. He drew 50 walks at least. There was a 5 walk to strikeout gap, but he walked more times than he struck out. I don't know if anyone will come out and say that maybe when the offense was struggling and teams were kind of pitching around Carson that it was hurting them. Because you're never going to say a guy drawing a walk is hurting you, but they I think part of it was they were able to take the bat out of Carson's hands. Obviously, his on base percentage was good and his average was good, but he wasn't able to. And not to. And this isn't his fault. It's teams were pitching around him, but he wasn't able to make as big of an impact. If that makes sense, swinging the bat. Obviously, still hit well, hit a bunch of homers, but I think teams really kind of learned like this is kind of a guy we have to pitch around because one swing of the bat can make the difference in the game. You saw, kind of obviously the second game of the doubleheader didn't go, the UNC doubleheader didn't go, Tech's way, but, DeMart homered twice. And I mean, that first inning homer was huge that he hit. They kind of ignited a lot of fireworks, obviously the fireworks center field and then fireworks with Clemson or UNC's bench. But, I thought his biggest jump this year was, taking more walks and striking out less. And I think, that's something scouts, next year, how does he improve? Does he walk even more or does he strike out less? I thought that was just kind of the biggest and most underrated part of his game this year.
Yeah. And, he's a guy who you can see making a really massive jump next year, right? When they're pitching around me. How do I deal with that? How do I still impact the game? And obviously having him healthy at third base would be tremendous because he is really exciting on the hot corner. Hokies have 2 all freshman ACC players as well. And I think a snub. I think they should have had 3. Brody Donay, the catcher, all ACC freshman, and Garrett Michelle, first baseman, all ACC. Credit to those guys. Brody Donay is, I think he's a guy who could be really, really special. Just in physical tools as a power bat at the college level are out of this world. And he got better and better as the season went on, not only offensively, but I think defensively as a catcher, he was a guy where you're like, oh, we probably can't have this guy back there. And then towards the end of the season, he was great. I mean, he was really solid, has a really good arm, can probably get a little bit cleaner and blocking some balls. But other than that, really impressive from Brody Donay. Garrett Michelle is a guy who just stepped on campus and was like, I guess I'm the starting first baseman now. Like, you've never had to worry about Garrett Michelle. He would just go out there, do his job, good fielder, good bat. Really surprised that Garrett Michelle, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Brody, projects as a catcher. I would think, maybe he ends up moving. They're bringing in a few, solid catching freshmen next year, I guess signees. Um, I would be a little surprised if Done stuck at catcher. I could see him more, in an outfielder DH role, but um, you know, I thought I thought he was probably. I know Garrett had hit 330, but I thought he was probably the biggest piece to come on because he and I guess yeah, Clay Grady, they both won jobs. It's not like they were starting every day. They were playing one game a week. They really had to earn their starting roles, and I thought Brody did a really good job. And at the end of the year, he kind of learned you don't have to swing. You don't have to hit a homer every time you come up. He had a lot of clutch singles in the sixth and seventh innings of multiple games. I think Clay Grady, his speed is a game changer. I'm surprised. I am a little surprised he didn't make the All ACC
He's
freshman
on
team.
Clay Grady. You're on my all ACC freshman.
But Clay, he's he makes such an impact with his glove and his speed. And I mean, he hits for a high average too. I mean, he'll quietly have 2 or 3 hits a night. He's not going to beat you with power, not yet, at least if he ever does. But and then Garrett Michelle, I mean, he has an interesting story too. He said he really didn't have that great of a fall. His confidence was kind of down. But he came back in the spring and he hit an unofficial, I think it was like 9, 10, or 11 home runs in the inner squads, and that's kind of how he won that starting first baseman role. And he hit a home run, his first career collegiate home run down in Charleston in that first series, and I thought, I was like, okay, man, like this, like Garrett Michelle is going to be special, and I think he can only get better from here.
Yeah, and if you look for the Hokies, third base, you got locked down next year. Shortstop, you got locked down for next year. You have options at second base. First base, you got locked down.
I think
Catcher.
I think you have second base locked down with Christian Martin. I mean, that may
Oh,
he had
true.
it.
I mean, yeah, but you have options there to move guys around.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, Catcher, you have a guy, and then you're gonna have to do some movement in the outfield. But with the way Virginia Tech's recruited, I think they have a lot of good athletes, and they have some guys that they probably could move to outfield if they needed to. So, especially in the infield, though, like Virginia Tech has a really good young core of players. And it's very exciting to see them build the infield because that can make a huge difference in the wins and loss columns in college baseball. All right. Well, that's kind of all we got now. Hokies play tomorrow at 11 a.m. against Boston College. Be sure to check that out. We will be back with however the ACC tournament goes. It could be only 2 games. The Hokies could win the whole thing. We really don't know. It'll be a challenge for the Hokies, but I think there is, especially after last year's ACC tournament where the Hokies got roughed up by UNC there's a little bit of, there's no pressure on the Hokies right now. All the pressure's on, Clemson wants to be a top 8 seed. Boston College is a team that still needs to impress the committee. Hokies are there just to play baseball. So it should be exciting in one of the best minor league parks in the country.
Yeah, I mean yeah. I mean this week, I mean you could say some pressures on Tech because I don't think their seasons, even if they don't win it, I don't think their season's particularly done. I still think they'd have a shot at an at-large spot if they make the tournament final. But I mean their backs are against the wall. We saw I was against during the UVA series. They lost that Friday game, came back and won that Sunday. Got hot at the right there, got hot in the middle of the season. Obviously, tailed off towards the end, but we've seen this team. They can play well and their backs against the wall. They can play with their backs against the wall and ball.
Yep. We'll be looking forward to it watching tomorrow morning. That'll be it. And we will talk to you all later. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, thanks for having me.